This is New Rural Virginia, reclaiming rural leadership through conversation featuring real voices, real issues from the heart of the Commonwealth. Hey y'all, you are listening to New Rural Virginia podcast, and I'm Parson Brown. Welcome back.
And I'm Larry Wohlers, and we are your podcast hosts. So, Parson, we haven't seen each other since the 4th of July, 250 years. I don't think I was born then.
No, since before that, but yeah, 200, you weren't, 200. So a big deal. Did you do anything fun?
Well, we had the grandkids, so I ended up sitting at home and watching the fireworks on TV. And I must say, they were pretty impressive, even on TV.
Yeah. I also sat at home and just kind of enjoyed that solace. We got a storm. That's rural life for me. And the power went out almost for a minute. So.
Indeed. But while we were thinking about the 250th and all of that means, for our country and our state, things are happening under the surface, right? Something else is going on, and maybe it's just not on our radar screen yet, right?
And I don't think you're talking about the reflecting pool in D.C.
Something most of us aren't yet paying attention to, but our Lieutenant Governor Ghazala Hashmi is telling us that this is a really big deal. And we all have to be really focused. And that is the proposed acquisition of our very own Dominion Energy by this Florida giant, NextEra Energy.
The LG is back, but this time she's here with a really important message that she has been urging every Virginian to pay attention to. Y'all might have noticed she's been all across different platforms in the media, so we're very thrilled to have her, but we've got some really important content to discuss, and that's a conversation that we want to get to you right away.
That's right. Even though it's also kind of complex, a little bit nerdy, this is something that is going to be very important.
Nerdy is good when when the stakes are so high.
That's right. And the Lieutenant Governor has really been a leader in Richmond in getting people to say, hey, folks, we need to pay attention. So without further ado, let's turn it over to her. Madam Lieutenant Governor, thank you for being with us today. Virginia is being asked to approve the creation of the nation's largest utility. In fact, I think someone said the world's largest utility, by allowing our own Dominion to be bought by NextEra Energy. On the one hand, those two companies are telling us that this is going to be great for us consumers, right? We're going to get billions of dollars back in rebates, and good for these power-hungry data centers. But on the other hand, we're hearing from people, some of the news companies saying, these companies are looking to outrun legislative oversight by pushing this deal through fast before lawmakers can have a chance to reshape it. So we know you've been very vocal about this, and certainly more vocal than other people in Richmond, including some in your own party. And some seem kind of resigned to this merger just happening on the company's terms. So what's going on? Can you explain this to our rural listeners?
Yes, well, I think it's really important that everybody in Virginia understand and be a part of this conversation. It's not just a merger we're talking about. In fact, it is an acquisition. It is an acquisition of a Virginia-based company, our largest public utility here in Virginia, of course, Dominion Energy, by an outside, out-of-state company, NextEra. And it is an acquisition that we need to take our time and give our full consideration, because it's going to have an impact for decades to come on our ratepayers, on our consumers, and also on our workers. Dominion is one of the largest employers in the Commonwealth, and we must be very deliberate and thoughtful about this process, making sure that an acquisition such as this is not going to harm, but in fact that it will be of benefit to Virginia. And I think that's the crux of the question is, What benefits does this acquisition bring to us here in the Commonwealth?
So what I hear you're saying is you're not necessarily opposed to the merger. You just think we need to be very careful about how we review it.
I can't oppose something if I don't even have answers to important questions. And I think that's true for all of us. I can't take an opinion one way or another. You know, this acquisition might, in fact, be good for Virginia, might be healthy for our ability to provide the critical energy services that we need here in Virginia. But I'm not in a position to say yes or no. I don't think anybody is, because once we have the regulatory process go through, once we have the filing in front of us, and once we get answers to some very important questions, I think then we will be in a position to make an informed decision. But one thing I know is that every leader must have clear data, clear insights, details, and information in order to make a good decision. And that's what I'm counting on for our regulators at the SEC, that they receive all necessary information in order to move forward one way or another on this proposal.
Yeah, that's actually a perfect segue to welcome back, Madam Lieutenant Governor. But, on that note, rural Virginians across the Commonwealth are hyper-focused on rapid expansion of data centers into our communities. And last night, here in Warren County, I attended a packed public hearing that went until almost midnight, with our Planning Commission ultimately recommending denial of a proposed zoning amendment that would open the door to data centers here. Shenandoah County, our neighbors over the mountain, took a different path a while back and rejecting calls for a moratorium and adopting an ordinance that has a lot of residents concerned about the future. And the debate over trusting ordinances versus imposing moratoriums keeps coming up. Far fewer of my neighbors are talking about this merger, but given what you've explained, I do see a parallel in the concern over acting before we fully understand the long-term consequences. So you've actually put forward a list of 64 questions you believe should be answered before the merger process goes any further. These issues are intertwined. Could you explain how the merger could change the stakes for rural communities grappling with data center development decisions right now? And what are some key answers that residents and local leaders should be seeking?
Sure. You know, I know that most of our rural communities, many of these communities are served by our electric co-ops. And so many people feel like there's not a stake in the process in this acquisition that we're talking about. But in fact, as you well know, when we're talking about massive changes as we are seeing to Virginia's electric systems, we're also talking about key infrastructure. So even though rural Virginia relies largely on our electric co-ops in order to ensure that data centers and these large new industries that are moving into Virginia have the energy, they have the capacity to meet the energy needs. We're talking transmission lines, massive projects to ensure that we are able to provide the necessary electric demand. And those have direct consequences for rural Virginia. These transmission lines are impacting farms and communities and changing the landscape. So everybody in the Commonwealth ought to be taking a clear look at this issue and considering the impacts that it is going to have. And it's not just on our monthly electric bill. It is quality of life. It is the impacts to our environment and to the landscapes of where we live. So these are all concerns that impact each of us.
That's very true from where we stand. Both Parston and I, we get our electricity from the Rappahannock Electric Co-op, which has been great. Member owned, the members, that's us. That's a good thing. But we're been a little cooperative, 100,000 people. And now they're talking about needing enough energy the size of New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles combined. With that kind of pressure on that demand side and having this kind of gigantic for-profit utility on the other, can the rural cooperative business model survive this? Would it be in danger?
That's a very important question, and I don't think we have any clear answers right now. Clearly, if data centers are going to be part of the equation in our rural localities, then meeting that considerable and large load on the electric grid has got to be part of that discussion. And it may be that the wholesale market from Dominion becomes much more key and important as a player in meeting this demand in our rural areas. And we're going to see some pretty significant changes over the next decade, certainly. So those are all top of mind issues. You saw very clearly this past session considerable and heated conversations on data centers, on
Yes.
regulations of the data
Oh, yeah.
industry.
Mhm.
It
Oh,
wasn't
yes.
just it wasn't just an issue of the sales and tax use, the sales and use tax on our state budget,
Right.
but it was much more comprehensive than that. We have to understand environmental impacts. We have to understand the ways in which our water systems are being affected. And take into consideration regional, not just local decisions on this kind of land use. And so these are very big and important and urgent discussions. I think this upcoming session, you're going to see much more comprehensive discussions around the data center industry here in Virginia.
Absolutely. I mean, it's an urgent discussion because all of this just seems so very rushed.
Yeah.
Across the board. So Clean Virginia has argued that this merger is about more than electricity and that it raises a broader question about whether we will allow increasingly powerful monopolies to shape our economy and our political system. Do you agree?
When I'm talking to folks, they're raising these same concerns. One of the reasons I wrote the op-ed and the reason I sent the letter to the SEC is the concerns I'm hearing from my constituents about the acquisition. And also, significantly from the experts. I had the opportunity to speak with Scott Hempling, who is the nation's foremost expert on mergers of this sort. And he had testified to the Commission on Electric Utility Usage here in Virginia. He testified a few weeks ago, and that's really what piqued my interest, just listening to his concerns, understanding this level of expertise that he brings in, asking that we slow down the process so that we can get clear answers. And after having a private conversation with Scott, I realized we need more information. We need better information. We also need a standard that is not seeking just to, our current standard, which was written almost 100 years ago, is basically that it should do no harm. Well, that's a little vague and a little broad. And our standard ought to be, what is the benefit? What is the public benefit by having an out-of-state corporate entity come to Virginia and acquire Dominion Energy, which is our Virginia-based company? And what is the benefit that it's going to bring to Virginia's families? I think that ought to be our top of mind concern. I'm not when I think about Dominion Energy, I think about families because so many of the workers, the employees of Dominion are my constituents and have been in my Senate district and certainly now all throughout Virginia. Many of them are friends and neighbors. And certainly all of the consumers of Dominion Energy are constituents as well. So focusing on the impacts that we're going to see on our
Hmm.
families has to be our top of mind concern. I think it ought to be the foremost consideration as we go forward in deciding whether or not this acquisition is going to be approved.
Absolutely. Speaking of the dangers of monopolies, Virginia has long been widely considered to have some pretty lax campaign finance laws, right? And that's allowed companies like Dominion, a regulated utility, to contribute millions of dollars to uh, people in the state legislature. Um, and that was one thing when electricity was a pretty boring thing. It was just a 1 or 2% a year change. But imagine a new mega company, the largest utility in the world, having that kind of power. Can Virginia really have a strong approach to regulating this kind of situation if we don't reform our campaign finance laws? Is that should that be a priority now?
I think absolutely it should have been a priority decades ago.
Mm,
And people around the country say, and we in Virginia say, that we are the wild, wild west when it comes to campaign finance. Unlimited contributions are certainly possible here in Virginia. And it is concerning when we have the influence of money on policy decisions that impact families in every single way. So certainly we've been trying to articulate better campaign finance structures here in Virginia. One thing that has been a good model for us is that we have a certain degree of transparency. The ways in which financial disclosures are made on a very regular basis around campaigns and
right,
contributions,
right.
that is a good model. But we also need to have reform that limit the ways in which money can influence or affect which candidates can run, who wins, and how that money then is influencing policy decisions. That's very clear. Other states have moved forward effectively with
Hmm.
limiting the impact of campaign contributions. I don't see why Virginia cannot do it as well.
Yeah. Well, I just also wanted to say that I did read the list of your 64 questions, and it is quite a list, very thorough and very thoughtful. But for our listeners who are concerned about this merger and where can they learn more and what can they do right now to make a difference?
I think a good place to start is making sure that people are keeping on top of any news coverage that is emerging from these decisions as we go forward. I would also encourage your listeners to reach out to their state senators and to their delegates and have them share their concerns with their representatives. These are the folks in Richmond who make decisions on what happens, especially on a critical issue such as this acquisition. And it is really important that citizens know that they have a voice, that they are able to communicate with their local representatives and share their concerns, and then also ask for information. I would certainly ask my local representatives to highlight what they are hearing and seeing, and also where they stand as this process moves forward. I would ask your listeners to ask their state senators and to ask their delegates to join me in asking the kind of tough questions we want to make sure that the SEC is asking, and that they are able to receive the comprehensive answers that we need before the regulatory process moves forward.
Yeah, ask more questions. Yeah.
Right, absolutely. And thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule
Yeah.
to help us educate our listeners about this.
Madam Lieutenant
Well,
Governor,
thank you.
no, thank you so much. Before you go, I last time you were here, you told us a little bit about your literature and government series. I was wondering if you had any updates on that program because I think it's really such a great thing.
Well, thank you so much for asking the question. I'll actually be swinging close to you In the early fall, I'll be at Wytheville Community College and Roanoke College and Radford University. We've got 3 lectures lined up in the latter half of September. And I'll be focusing on literary texts that really speak to the situations in Appalachia, to our communities there, and the concerns that face so many people. One of the books that I've selected, of course, is our beloved author Barbara Kingsolver. I'll be taking a look at Demon Copperhead, juxtaposing it as well with David Copperfield, the classic from Victorian England. But talking about some key issues that emerge from her novel about the foster care system, about our communities that are impacted by poverty, and the need for more representation and voice in so many of these critical discussions. I'll also be taking a look at another wonderful writer from the Southwest region, Sharon McCrum, 2 novels out of her ballad series, The Hangman's Daughter, and others. And we'll have some good conversations around her novels. And in Wytheville Community College, I'll be taking a look at Studs Terkel's classic Working, which focuses on an oral history of labor and people who do the hard and necessary work and find meaning and help us to understand the meaning of life. So it is an oral history, but is also a philosophy of life as well. So I'm really excited about being in the region and expanding my conversation around what's happening in government through the lens of literature.
That's fantastic. I'm so glad you're doing that. Literacy is important to me. My mother was a school teacher, a reading specialist, as a matter of fact. And of course, in Warren County, we, our public library was under attack for the last few years. We are hoping to, in the next session, to be able to put language into some legislation to provide protections for public libraries so that doesn't happen to any other community's public library again. So we really appreciate all you're doing.
Well, thank you for doing that work. You have my full support. I'm going to join you in that fight.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor. We appreciate that.
Okay. Well, thanks so much. And we'll look forward to talking again soon.
Please come back anytime.
You.
Yes.
Thank you. Wonderful to see you both.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
New Rural Virginia Podcast, Conversations about Rural Virginia's Future, is a product of New Rural Virginia. Visit newruralva.org for more. Please like, share, subscribe, and follow us. We're available anywhere you get your audio. For deeper dives into the topics we cover, catch additional insights and stories on the Rural Angles Substack newsletter. This program is produced by Larry Wohlers and yours truly, Parson Brown. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned for the next episode.